Let me just. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandro Tejada, Director of Major Gifts and the Seton Hall Parents Program. Thank you for joining our virtual offering, How I Got Here, discussion with Seton Hall parent Bernie Tobin. I just want to let everyone that this session is being recorded. Please kindly mute yourself. And if you have any questions during this session, please use the raise your hand icon on the top right of your screen and use the chat feature to share your questions or hold your questions until our Q&A session. The How I Got Here discussions provides our students the opportunity to get a firsthand perspective about the careers enjoyed by our wonderful, talented Seton Hall parents. And this evening, I'm honored to have the privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Bernie Tobin. Bernie is General Manager at Natera. He is a global healthcare leader with an extensive background in the biotechnology, medical diagnostics, and pharmaceutical industries. Throughout his career, he has implemented strategies and executed tactics to rapidly expand the business, transform operational performance, build corporate cultures of encouragement and empowerment, and develop strong leaders and effective professionals. Bernie has managed upwards of 400 direct and indirect employees and budgets of 100 million plus million annually. Thank you, Bernie, for joining us this evening, and the floor is yours.
Sandro, thanks a lot. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to folks. I look forward to questions, and I will try to make my one slide short enough that there's time for that if people have any. I thought it might be useful to have something visual to describe the path. And I guess if I did this properly and was more talented with my slides, it would be a winding path, but I'm not good enough to do that. So you'll have to put up with a circular one. I'll start it in the upper left-hand corner. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and this is a picture of the farm in September when things were still green. And I'm very proud of the farm and the life that afforded myself and my three older brothers. We were blessed to have parents that took education very seriously and wanted to make sure that we did our part and try to make the world a better place. So from there, I went to Iowa State University, had no clue what I wanted to study when I went, but knew that I needed to be doing something. And I guess many times I get asked questions about what's the right degree. And I think by and large, it's less important what the name on the degree is, and it's more important what you get out of that. I think Seton Hall's a terrific institution. We've been blessed to have two children be there, Emma, who's graduated, and Kelly, who's there now. And Lisa, my wife, and I have, I think, been big believers that it's important to get a strong undergraduate institution as a background. And if you choose to go on to advanced education, then that's probably where you want to spend even more of your money and time to do that. But just get a really solid undergrad institution. And I found that with after Iowa State, I had a chance to go on an exchange program to Norway. I was asked to speak about American culture to Norwegian schools and to Norwegian groups. Since I didn't know any Norwegian when I got there, I had a lot to learn. So it took about 3 months before I could speak Norwegian well enough to be able to do that. But had a terrific experience about that. It opened my eyes to that there's a bigger world out there, and one that isn't scary. This was before internet, so I was writing my then fiance, now wife, many letters during that time, and spending $3 a minute when I could get a phone out. So the internet's a little bit nicer now, but the world is a smaller place, and I found that early on was important for me. I came back and I went to work for Cargill, which, if you don't know Cargill, they're one of the largest private companies in the world. They had a great training program. I enjoyed it immensely, and I traded commodities and got a chance to manage a P&L, a profit and loss statement, early on in my career, which was something I enjoyed immensely and learned a lot from. and then took the opportunity after 4.5 years to go to graduate school. The company that I had joined, Cargill, was terrific at teaching me how to manage operating expenses and how to lead people. But because they were in a commodity business, I didn't learn much about marketing or strategy beyond that. So I felt like I needed to broaden my skill set to be able to do the things I wanted to in life. And so I chose to go to Duke University. They were kind enough to win their first national championship while I was there. So that was a lot of fun to be a part of, and enjoyed that immensely, gained lifelong friends and contacts. And I continue to be on advisory boards at Duke University and participate in things there. So have enjoyed that a lot. When I was coming out of business school, I guess there's a common theme here that I had an open mind about what to do, kind of like when I went into undergrad and not being sure what. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to take advantage of that, like frankly many people do at business school, to pivot on the industry I wanted to be a part of. And it became clear to me that there's a lot of different ways that you can get paid to make a living. But I think it's incredibly important, and more important, that you choose something that gets you out of bed in the morning excited about making a difference. And I chose to go into healthcare. Healthcare is in the headlines every day, and that's intellectually interesting. But more importantly, it's such a key part of what makes a society healthy, not just physically, but mentally, and also just holding the glue together. And I made the decision that going to a healthcare related company, in this case, Eli Lilly, they had a leadership rotation program of 3 different jobs that you would do for a period of time when you first started. That gave me a chance to see different parts of the company before I chose what I wanted to do. I started off in strategic planning and business development and got to do some fascinating things, including acquisition, that allowed me to again see the broader world and be part of the strategy that we were building. And I chose to be with Eli Lilly for quite an extended period of time, and I went into that believing I would be there for my career. I was fortunate in 16 years with them that I had 12 different roles, and that gave me a chance to experience lots of different parts of business and lots of different ways to learn. Probably one of the more interesting ones was my last role. I was asked to create an internal consulting team that I would take high-performing individuals across the international talent set that Eli Lilly has and pull them together for engagements in the top 10 countries that Lilly was operating in. Lilly was trying to figure out how to be successful in places like China. So I would take a team of people with me and spend 2 weeks there with the general manager and the general manager's team to focus on some key business issues to be able to help them be successful. So getting to do that with talented people, I found to be very motivating and fun to develop those folks, but also to be in those different countries. Even though you're working a ton, I always told people, you give me the weekdays and I'll give you the weekend, and so that they could have it. And I was excited to get some people that had never been out of the country to get a chance to do that. I then chose to leave to go to Amgen because I saw biotechnology as opposed to pharmaceuticals as, I think, an important advancement in science and what could be done to get that to patients faster. And I chose to go to work for Amgen on the West Coast. It didn't hurt that Lilly was in Indianapolis and Amgen was in California. It's a little bit warmer in the wintertime in California, so that was well. But I went there to lead a business unit and also the national accounts. And after 2 years, had the opportunity to take Lisa and the kids to the Netherlands, where I was the general manager for the Netherlands. And that was a fascinating exposure to a new culture personally, and then business-wise, to be accountable for what was the 8th largest business in Amgen's world, and one that was quite complex with the way payment is done. Getting a chance to try to learn enough of the Dutch language to be more than dangerous so I could understand what was being said. but still always needing an interpreter when I met with government officials and others to be able to make sure that we got the point across. I'll tell you a story about that in a little bit more, but that was a great experience. Then had the chance, we were originally supposed to go to the Netherlands for 3 years and then go back to the States, but 2 years into it, they asked us to go to Switzerland, which is the international headquarters for Amgen. Amgen was trying to countries globally, and I was asked to set up a commercial organization to get that done. Again, fascinating personal experience and business experience. Blessed to have kids that were flexible enough to say yes to the Netherlands and yes to Switzerland, and had a chance to do some really interesting work there in that role. After 2 years, came back to the global headquarters at Amgen, and interestingly enough, was doing a global job from Thousand Oaks, California, that transitioned into an acquisition that Amgen did, buying assets from Roche in Basel, Switzerland, back not too far from where we were living before I moved to California again. And it was in 102 countries, and I had a chance to lead that acquisition. I think a common refrain I've said to many of my jobs is I don't have a clue how to do that when I got the opportunity. But I've always found those things that you don't have a clue how to do really the most interesting things that you can do, because it stretches you in a way and gives you a chance to learn and make a difference. So I led that acquisition, and then had a period of time where Amgen was opening a business in Brazil, and we bought a local business, but we wanted to merge it with the Amgen business. So I was asked to go down and be the general manager for Brazil while I was doing the other job. So a bit of a twofer, if you will. And so I was in Sao Paulo for an extended period of time, getting that business off the ground and integrating 2 different organizations, while at the same time looking for my replacement to be able to find a local talent to be in charge of Brazil. So I had the opportunity to experience those different countries, both personally and professionally, and was lucky enough to have the family with me for the Netherlands and Switzerland. But the quick story on the Netherlands piece is you have these moments in your career that stick with you, and I had one there. Not long after I got to the Netherlands, I was in the city of Maastricht, and was meeting with a nephrologist who was the equivalent of a U.S. senator as well. So he practiced medicine, and he was a politician. But he was of an age where when he had me sit down, he called me young man. So I liked him immediately. But he said, young man, I want to thank you for saving my life and my family's life and my country's life. In World War II, when the American soldiers came through, we were literally starving to death. And your soldiers saved our lives. And I thanked him. Of course, I had nothing to do with it personally, but he wanted to make sure that on behalf of America that I understood where he was coming from. And what I thought was going to be a quick 15-minute conversation turned into about 2 hours. And in the course of that discussion, he said to me, I've admired your country so much as I've grown up, become a doctor, become a politician. I've followed what America does and who you are. But he said, you have to answer one thing for me. And that is, how do you call yourselves a civilized country if you don't provide health care for your citizens? And that hit me hard, because that was hard for me to answer. Frankly, not something I'd actually contemplated before. But I tell you this, it stuck with me, because after 8 years at Amgen and 6 different jobs, I was offered an opportunity to move into the space of precision medicine. And precision medicine is, simply said, where you are able to understand which drugs will work for which people at the right time. And that discussion I had with that doctor in Maastricht stuck with me, because one thing I found, be it in, frankly, Norway or the Netherlands or Switzerland or Brazil or the many other countries I traveled for the other acquisitions, a common thing that governments are faced with is, how do they pay for health care for their citizens? Because it's expensive And the world is growing in population, so that equation becomes much harder for most every country around the world. So I thought long and hard about this, and had the fortune of having daughters who were very persuasive as well, where they actually took me into the bedroom and set me down and said, "Dad, we think you should take this opportunity." So I found it's better when I do what my kids tell me. So that combination, and being touched by the fact that I could try to apply precision medicine in a real way that makes a difference for patients, was very compelling. So I chose to do that. And I went to work for the parent company is Myriad, but it was a call from someone that I had known years ago that said, "Hey, we've purchased this company in the Bay Area called Crescendo Bioscience. We don't think the founder of the company is the right person to scale it. Can we convince you to come do this?" And so that's what I said yes to. And it was in the space of immunology, specifically autoimmune diseases for patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And this is a case where we had developed technology, and I'm using the term "we" loosely because I had nothing to do with the development. But we had developed technology that allowed patients with rheumatoid arthritis, using a simple blood test, to understand how their disease is progressing. The state of the art is physicians touching and squeezing joints and count how many are swollen. And that would be almost akin to going in, if you have leukemia, to your oncologist and having him touch your forehead and saying, "You feel like your leukemia is worse today." And so I felt really passionate about bringing modern technology to a group of patients that need that help. And so that's what we did. And we were successful in getting that as part of the guidelines for doctors to use. Had lots of challenges along the way, as there always is when you're developing new technology. But made a switch here earlier this year, because Myriad made a pivot in what they were prioritizing as far as places to fund with the groups of companies they had purchased, and had financial realities that didn't allow them to fund the businesses I was running in the way that we had planned on. So I made the move to Natera, which is where I sit today. And what I'm responsible for today is what's called the organ health business. Our two flagship products relate to patients with kidney transplant. That's a transplant that 30% of the patients will lose that transplant after 5 years and 50% after 10. So what we've done is develop technology, again, a blood test that allows them to understand if the body's rejecting it, and the doctor can then increase the immunosuppressant drugs to help them be successful in keeping that kidney transplant. And then we also have a product for kidney genetics. 30 to 40 million Americans have chronic kidney disease and don't know it. And so we've developed a genetic panel that lets them know that, so the doctor can intervene and keep them from going down the path of dialysis and transplant. Those are the two things that we're doing now, but we'll be expanding into the area of heart, lung, and liver transplant in the next 18 months, and some other genetic panels. But the common theme here is personalized medicine, and doing something that actually helps people, helps governments to be able to afford healthcare. And that's the path that I've chosen. So I guess at the start of this, the question I was answering was how I got here. And a kid that grew up on the farm that actually has a degree in agriculture is now working in biotech in the Bay Area. I guess I would use that to say that if I can do that, any of you listening can do anything you want, and shouldn't feel constrained by any of the things that the people throw up as barriers. So why don't I stop by saying I had to put in the center of this photo, or this slide, my proudest achievement, which is to have a family. Excuse me. Sorry. The kids know that if they ever get married, I'm going to be a blubbering fool. So hopefully they won't do that. But proudest achievement anyone can have is you're trying to raise kids that are here to make the world a better place. And I married well. And I'll just leave it at that. So sorry, Sandra, you can edit that part out.
No, not at all. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Any questions? Anything come to mind?
Well, Bernie, I could start off with a question that's been asked to parents that have participated in this series, and it's a question that I've heard from a lot of students that I interact with, especially in this environment that we're in. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, I know a lot of students are concerned about, what's after college. And you mentioned that, the path that you decided to take was to go, right into work, but also, going to grad school, which is an amazing opportunity for a lot of students. And I think that's one of the things a lot of our students that I'm talking to are interested in. But what was the decision? I know you mentioned that you want to learn a little bit more and expand your skill set, but what made that decision for you to know that, grad school was the right decision at that time?
Yeah, you know what? When you get out into the working world, or frankly, whatever you're doing, if you're like me, you end up ending each day with more questions than you have answers. And there were things I was running across that I just didn't have answers for, that were as basic in business as I was managing a bunch of accountants, and I'd never taken an accounting class in my life. Might be good for me to understand that better. So, what I could learn by just reading a book at night is probably different than studying it. But I felt like, and I alluded to this earlier, but if I was going to go to grad school and spend that time and money and effort, I wanted to go to a top 10 business school. And those schools tend to require 4 to 5 years of work experience because frankly, so much is from your fellow students. And without sounding too whatever, the more life experiences you are, the more interesting you are in the classroom discussions. So that's why the business schools at least require that. Now, that's not true for all grad schools because there are many programs that's not helpful for it. But for a group environment where it's interactive learning, that's an important piece. And I just decided, Sandra, that there was a lot I didn't know. So I was a very involved student in grad school as comparison to just trying to get a good grade in a class. I came armed with questions. And I'm here to tell you, and I apologize if I insult any accountants on the line. There's no part of me that wants to ever be an accountant, but I was active in that accounting class because I had a lot of things I didn't understand, or I understood only superficially. And then I would go into operations classes and go into different finance classes, and life's about getting smarter too. And so I say I ended each day with more questions than answers. It was the right time in life for me to do that, to go back and have a lot of questions I really wanted to understand better. And so that's why that timing was good.
Thank you, Bernie. So there is a question in the chat, and it's from Anna Tobin. She says, "Hi, Bernie, big fan." She
Thanks,
asks,
Anna.
"How do you feel the work ethic of growing up on a farm has impacted your work ethic today?" Great question.
Thanks, Anna, for that. I think that one of the things that I learned growing up on a farm is if you don't do it, it's probably not going to get done. And at times in life, it's just basically you put your head down and you get it done. And so I was in a situation where we got up in the morning and we went out and fed the livestock and did chores, and then you'd come in and grab breakfast, and if you could do a quick shower, I think your classmates would appreciate it after being with the hogs and the cattle, and head to school. And then after school, you would have practice for football or basketball or whatever, and then you'd come home and do chores and then do your homework and go to bed. And the only difference on the weekends is you didn't go to school and you just worked outside all day on the farm. So I think I probably learned early on that, again, it doesn't get done if you don't do it. And I found that for me personally, there's a lot of smart people in the world, but there's not as many people that are willing to do the work. And so I think that when I got into business, I found that that for me to be successful, I had to use hopefully a brain that was capable of it, also just pure work. And so I think that everybody can make that decision about what that means to them and how many hours a day that is. But I guess it started for me early on that I'm not sure I had a choice. I had to jump out of bed and do that. Not sure my dad would have let me stay in bed.
Awesome. This is a question from Leanne Rafrano, who's going to be an incredible leader one day once she graduates. Leanne is a senior at Seton Hall, and I've had the pleasure of working with her and learning a lot from her. So thank you, Leanne, for joining us. And her question is, what was your favorite class in graduate school and why? Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Leanne, I'm glad to hear that you're a senior, and I'm sorry for you, what you're having to go through your senior year, but we will get through this. My favorite class in grad school was a class called Entrepreneurship. And it allowed us to form a team that needed to write a business plan that would create enough revenue that it would pay basic salaries for the four of us, but it had to scale and had to be something with a growth plan that venture capital would invest in. The cool thing about it was we were able to present it to venture capitalists, and they actually awarded real money to groups that they wanted to support. So that gave me an opportunity to do a variety of things that were able to be brought together in one class. And Leanne, if you'll allow me, I just want to extend from your question to tell you something that I wish somebody would have told me when I was your age. A big part of life is figuring out what your definition of success is. And that's a lifelong journey for many, if not most of us, to figure out what that is. But an important question to answer if you really want to have a way to sort through the many opportunities you're going to have when you come out of school. But I think one of the things I learned the hard way is probably like a lot of you, I would create at the start of each year a to-do list of things I wanted to accomplish that year. And I got satisfaction out of checking things off that to-do list. But after some years, that satisfaction is limited, at least has a short life cycle. And it wasn't until I figured out that I needed to create a to-be list to put in front of that to-do list that helped me to understand what should really hit the to-do list. And by to-be list, for me, it was describing kind of in one sentence or two sentences at most, what I would want people to say about me as a husband, what I hope Lisa will say about me, what I would want my kids to say about me as a dad, what I would want my colleagues to say about me as a colleague. And that sort of to-be list was important for me because it started filtering out things that would have hit my to-do list in the past as things that were important for me to do during the year, and tried to make sure I put things that really did matter about making a difference. So I know you didn't ask that question, but it comes to mind since you asked about a favorite class. That's one of the things I wish I'd learned early on.
That's great advice, Bernie. I love that to-be list. I think I'm going to start one right now.
There you go.
Yeah,
you already got the beard to go with it. You look very wise.
That's awesome. So this is Bernie Guest, and I'm assuming someone that's related to you. But Bernie, you have a lovely family. Did you ever experience any doubts about your career decisions? And if so, what were they and how did you overcome them? Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Yes, my first job with Cargill is the first thing that comes to mind. I've often found that the doubts you have about decisions you make have to do with the person you're working for. I've been fortunate that I've enjoyed 98% of the people I've worked for, and I feel lucky with that. But I was assigned, and I hope I'm not insulting anybody from Nebraska, but my first job was in Grand Island, Nebraska. And that's not a thriving metropolis for those of you that haven't been there. Lovely people, but limited things to do. And then the person that was in charge of that place I was working, without casting stones, was not somebody I would aspire to be. And so when you're living in a place that isn't the most exciting, you're working a ton of hours. Saturdays were shorter days than the rest of the week, but busy too. And then you have somebody who's not exactly an inspiring individual to work for. That was a place where I thought this was a tough decision. The way I overcame it was Cargill was very clear in saying the better you do, the faster you learn, the better you perform, the faster you can get promoted. And so I 10 months later was out of Grand Island, Nebraska, because I worked really hard and tried to do that. So I controlled what I could control and felt like that was the best thing I could do while still learning, because there's always people around you can learn from that are good, even if it's not a direct supervisor. And even those that may not be as good a role model for you, you're learning something from them too, because it's a simple thing to say, learn what not to do, but you're also learning how not to do it. The whats are often pretty clear, but it's the hows too. And so taking that extra time to say, okay, what can I learn from this situation? Because you've got to manage your mental stress throughout. And then I'll fast forward. The role that I took with Crescendo Bioscience, I think every time I've started a new role, either with the company I'm employed by or with a brand new company, there's always a list of things I would call my oh crap list, where I didn't know the problem when I said yes to the job. And in that position, that oh crap list was about 3 pages long. And so it was a case of walking into something and recognizing that there's a whole lot to fix here that wasn't immediately apparent when I was checking this out. And recognizing that, life's full of surprises and you just got to prioritize what you run across. And so for me, it was a lot of sorting out, what's the urgent and important, what's the urgent, what are things I can do. I had to change out some senior leadership pretty quickly, like within the first week. Had to do a lot of changes to budgeting, had to do a lot of changes to the scientific approach. And, none of those things are fun, but people's jobs are relying on you and patients are relying that you do this right. So I guess how I handled that was making sure I stay true to that, what's my true north, and back to my to-be list of grounded on who I want to be, and remembering to act with that compassion, and always remembering that the decisions I'm making, as difficult as they are, they impact individual people. And you don't want to do that lightly, ever. If you do, you've lost your heart and you shouldn't be in leadership. But if it weighs on you too much and you can't make a decision, then you can't be a leader either. So I think it's just trying to remember that. And I guess the last comment would be is life's a journey that involves a lot of ups and downs. And everybody talks about this career ladder, that mental image that everybody has of a career ladder. I'm really fond of thinking of it as more of a jungle gym instead of a career ladder, because sometimes you have to go sideways or even down to be able to take a different route to get up. And if you try to just go up as fast as you can on a ladder, when you think about it, there's not a very broad base, and you can sometimes get so high that there's not a lot of breadth holding you up, such that gosh, if the world changes, and it often does, you've got nowhere to go but way back down to the ground. And so I think keeping that in mind is helpful too. Sorry for the long answer.
No, not at all. There's a question from Kelly Tobin. You know who she is. Kelly, do you want to ask the question yourself instead of me?
Yeah, I can do that.
I think your dad would like to hear your voice.
Hi, Dad.
You heard.
So I have a question about, do you believe that the experience you had traveling and living abroad in Norway helped prepare you for the challenges you faced later in your career abroad? And what was the most important lesson you learned while living abroad in regards to like your career and work-wise?
Yeah, so I do believe Norway helped me. First of all, I couldn't talk to anybody for a long time, so I had a lot of time to think. But it gave me a chance to see the world with different set of eyes. And it was my first time that I actually realized some of the biases I have in my head that I didn't really know I had. And an example of that would be that I was talking to a school superintendent, the grading system that they use for the schools in Norway. And I asked him, how do you grade papers and how do the students know how they're doing? And he said, well, we write on the exam or the paper, not your best work or better than last time or nice job. And I said, because I thought he didn't understand my question, no, I'm sorry, how do they know how they did? And he looked at me like I was kind of slow and said, we write on the paper, how did, not your best work, you can do better, whatever. And I said, but how do they know how they did versus each other? And he looked at me kind of sadly and said, why does that matter? And I thought, well, that's interesting, because the culture I was raised in is competitive and you want to know how you're doing versus everybody else. But here was a culture that was frankly quite successful, but that wasn't their first priority. It also happened to be the year of the Olympics, and the Norwegian marathoner was supposed to win the Olympics, and we were together with another family watching it, and she came in second. And they were cheering wildly. They were all excited. And I said, why are you excited? She got second. And they looked at me like, I was nuts. Again, that sort of thing. So Kelly, when you ask about, did it help me with business? I think it probably opened my mind that, okay, I've got shadows in my mind or assumptions that I just take to be truisms that may not be true everywhere. And that was important for me as that experience. And then the second part of your question was living abroad and what that does for you. It's probably an expansion of that, because as you well know, we've got to experience different cultures and different ways of thinking that I find incredibly energizing and fun, because there's a whole lot of ways to do this. And, I think what it's allowed me to do is when I was selecting people to go on those consulting agreements to different countries, one of the tricks I used was I took them to dinner, like to a Chinese restaurant beforehand, before we left, to kind of see, how they would handle food that was maybe different than normal, even though Chinese food sounds very normal. It's not to everybody. And what I found was the people would look at the dish that I ordered that was not, normally something they had. Some of them would say, oh, wow, this is different. And others would say, well, this is different. And the tone that you take in life of this is different, I'm excited, versus this is different, I don't want to try it, I think it speaks to who you'll be as a business person too, because you sort of see limits versus opportunities. And so I think that helped me to see more opportunities, to be exposed to that many different things can be done in ways that I never even conceived of before. And I guess the last thing is just understanding assumptions about culture. If I'm not careful, I'll do that with assumptions about people that may be Americans from a different background within their family or their faith or their whole way of living. And I got to be very open and careful about how I handle that in a way that's energizing for them and not stifling. And I guess one last comment is, we got a chance to live in Norway, or I got a chance to live in Norway, and we got a chance to live in Switzerland, both matriarchal societies. I said Switzerland, I meant the Netherlands. Those are both matriarchal societies. So being in a world that is matriarchal versus patriarchal was different for me. And it was really exciting to see, this sounds gratuitous, but I happen to believe it, that when we have women in charge and women leading things, the world tends to be a whole lot more stable and better and more holistic and more welcoming to all individuals. And that's been very good for me for business too. Thank you for the question. I'm impressed your bed is made in the background. Thank you for that.
Slightly rude, but thank you for the answer.
And since we're coming to our last question here, we have a wonderful question from Maura Byrne, and she states, "Your career path in healthcare is really interesting. Thank you for sharing. I'm on track to become a physician assistant, but biomedical healthcare companies have also sparked my interest rather than working in a hospital. Are there jobs in your industry that involve a more clinical focus for people that have a biology degree and not business degree?
Yeah, great question. Um, the short answer is yes. In fact, I would expand on that by saying that it's a yes, and a biology degree would be advantageous to us. I've got 8 marketing people on my team. All of them, and these are marketing people, all of them have a PhD in a hard science. I've got a bunch of people that are salespeople, and most of them have biology degrees or something in the sciences. I've got a bunch of people in market research and areas like that. Most of them have science backgrounds. And then we have clearly all the people in science and clinical research, clinical development, and all the different things that go with science. Clearly, all of those people have science backgrounds. So, yeah, you would be the norm, not the exception in the world that I live in.
Sandro, it's Kathy. I was wondering if I could ask a question.
Of course.
Hi, Bernie.
Hi, Kathy. Great to hear your voice.
Yeah. Good to hear you. And I've heard part of your story before, but hearing everything was super interesting. I have two-part question. One for students and thinking about, as they think about their summers and potential internship opportunities, as you've seen other resumes or even in your own experience and with your kids, what are some recommendations you would make in terms of the use of summers? And then my other question is around, you spoke about your to-be list, and I wonder, as you've gone through your career, have you ever felt you've had to compromise on your to-be list? And, what are some instances of that? And has that made you sort of change positions or careers?
Thanks, Kathy. Great questions. The first one on the summer internship, I do think they're very important. And Lisa and I talk about this a lot. I think one of the troubling things is too often companies try to do it without paying people. So it makes it impossible for someone who isn't financially, wealthy, if you will, at times to be able to take advantage of that. I would encourage you, in spite of that frustration, to try to get that experience, if for no other reason, to figure out if you want to do that or not. My internship I did between first and second year of business school was with AT&T in product management. And I learned in the first few days, I had no desire to do that. That was incredibly valuable for me. Because I wasn't taking a full-time job at the end of my second year to do something like that. So I think it's a great time to experiment as one course. And then the other courses is clearly your resume looks more impressive, or you've got more stories to tell if you've done it. So I think it's very much, Kathy, worth aspiring to, and is valuable to do. I will tell you not to get discouraged, because companies often have less summer internship opportunities than they do full-time jobs. So don't let that discourage you, but it's certainly something important to aspire to. Your second question about the to-be list and have I ever felt I had to compromise. I've never compromised before. I have had, I talked about one, but I've had a couple of bosses that I felt like were not of the same frame as I was about what I thought was how you lead your life. And I told you about one of them and working my tail off to get out of there. Interestingly enough, the common theme is I did it with the second one too, and that's where we went to the Netherlands. So those company values were still for me, but there's individuals inside large corporations that may or may not fit with how you look at the world. And particularly the second one, we had to have a very direct discussion about that. And he was doing some things with other people on the team that I just didn't feel comfortable with, and that made it a bit uncomfortable for me. But you just can't compromise with who you are. You got to sleep at night. So those are the two instances, Kathy, where I was faced with that, and that's how I had to choose to handle that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And I think Leanne is trying to type a question, but Leanne, just ask the question. Great to hear your voice. Leanne, are you there? Okay, she says, thank you for your insights. I will definitely be creating a to-be list going forward to help me guide my path. Thank you for the suggestion. Awesome.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, you know what? Any advice I give is worth what you paid for it. But if you got anything out of it, that's great. That would make me happy.
Well, thank you, Bernie, for joining us in this wonderful How I Got Here discussion and sharing your career path, which has been an amazing one. I mean, you've crossed countries, different cultures. You probably worked with thousands of amazing individuals, but we really appreciate you sharing your path to where you're at this moment at Natera, and we hope an amazing experience there as well. And again, thank you for sharing your time and your talent, and your daughters as well. To see, and your family has been a generous, amazing ambassadors for us in California. And again, thank you for everything you've done for Seton Hall and providing your life in your career as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Sandro and Kathy, and the great job you guys are doing. Please stay healthy and bless you for all that you're doing for our kids and making this available. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.